We're back in James, okay? Part 16. Before my holidays, we were in a kind of a two-part series on how to keep your life free from the most serious mistakes. How to keep your life free from the most serious mistakes. The text we're working with is James 4:11 through 17. I hope you have a Bible, one form or another. Get it out so you're looking up the passage. We'll work it through together. James 4:11 to 17. Do not speak evil against one another, brothers and sisters. The one who speaks against a brother or judges his brother speaks evil against the law and judges the law. I want to talk about that. But if you judge the law, you're no longer a doer of the law, but a judge. You set yourself up in a certain place in relation to the law. You assess it, whether it's necessary, whether you need to keep it, how you're going to observe it. You've set yourself up here as a judge over the law. 12. There's only one lawgiver and judge, he who is able to save and to destroy. But who are you? There's the question. Who are you to judge your neighbor? And now you get this subject shift, or so it seems. 13, come now, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go to such and such a town, spend a year there, trade, make profit. You don't know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? Everyone's supposed to ask themselves that. You're sitting here this morning. What is your life? He's going to answer it. You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live, do this or that. As it is, you boast in your arrogance. Now, they haven't really said anything that sounded boastful. Look at me, I'm great. It's not that. But he still says, you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. And then this reminder in 17, so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, well, for him, that's a sin. The meaning of this text, I think, is kind of indelibly linked with the verse immediately preceding verse 11. Verse 10 says, humble yourselves before the Lord, and he will exalt you. It's all about humility before God and letting God exalt you. And as I said last teaching before holidays, our text today deals with two different, though related sins that war against humility. And humility is important because you have to humble yourself before God if you want him to exalt you. So if I commit one of these two sins that he's going to describe and it wars against my humility, what it means is God can't exalt my life. I can find myself exerting the same effort, working just as hard, getting involved in things in the church and, doing the stuff you're supposed to do, but none of it's working. So he's going to deal with two sins that smother humility and keep God from exalting my life. So this stuff matters this morning. The first evil we started to look at was speaking against a brother or sister. That's in that 11th verse. The important word is that word against, speaking against. This is not, we've all had the thing of putting your foot in your mouth and, oh, I didn't mean that. Why did I say? This isn't that. This is words that are aimed at a target. They're against this person. They're against that person. They're aimed words. And the problem is when those words come out of my mouth, they just reveal a total lack of awareness of all the undeserved grace that I've received from the Lord. James says these evil words against a brother or sister, they reveal a heart that is setting itself above the law, totally against God's law. They're arrogant sins. They're the reason, by the way, and you guys don't have this reference, don't worry. They're the reason we have these instructions about the Lord's Supper, what we did. We're supposed to do it regularly. 1 Corinthians 11, 27 to 29. Whoever therefore eats the bread or drinks the cup of the Lord in an unworthy manner will be guilty concerning the body and blood of the Lord. And the primary way that we become guilty and unworthy is when I enjoy receiving grace from God for my sins. But boy, what Chris did, I'm not gonna forgive him for that. That's how you partake in an unworthy manner, and that's why we have that reminder. Okay, now we move on to the second sin, which James says feeds pride, smothers humility, closes my life up to divine grace. James deals with the kind of casual, I'm calling it casual presumption that can easily settle on all of our hearts as we go about our daily agenda. Now remember, James is dealing with these two sins because, as he reminded us in 4:10, God only exalts humble people. Humble yourselves before the Lord, he will exalt you. And now we're looking at two sins that have the same proud root. Evil words against a brother or sister that can only flow from a proud heart that's forgotten God's undeserved grace. And now this sin of presumption in daily living. It only flows from a heart that's forgotten its dependence. So point number 2. I'm never to assume the role of judging God's laws, nor his people. This would be better if I open up this pen, won't it? There's only one lawgiver. That's the reminder. It's not me. It's not you. And one judge. He who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge your neighbor? You can't help wonder if James isn't wording this verse particularly for people like you and I. If I'm the one speaking evil, and as James has just said, setting myself arrogantly against the law, then I'm speaking evil against a brother or sister because I feel I have the right to do so. I'm upset, they wronged me, they hurt me, they did something. So perhaps when I speak out against them, it might even actually be true. Maybe I have been hurt. Maybe I have been wrong. I'm not letting it go. So in speaking evil against a brother or sister, I have convinced myself he or she has it coming. And just for this moment, God, this overrides your law. Of course, you don't say that. You just do it. That's the meaning of that difficult 11th verse. I arrogantly put myself above the law. I judge the law. And then James says, but Don, there's only one judge. It's not you. God Almighty. And oh, by the way, 12, he is able to both save and destroy. That's a good reminder. He can save the one that I feel has wronged me and hasn't got a good bone in his body. He can save that, and he can destroy the one who speaks evil in the name of righteousness and dares to set himself above God's law. It's not the only place the New Testament addresses this crazy tendency that we can easily have to take God's job into our hands. Who are you to pass judgment? Like, Don, are you thinking about this when those words come out of your mouth? Who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It's before his own master that he stands or falls, and he will be upheld, for the Lord is able to make him stand. It's a very humbling thing to have God tell you that he can work wonders in the heart of a person you can't stand. That's really bad news, isn't it? God can work wonders in the heart of a person I don't like at all. We hate being told by God, all of us. We like being assured that we are candidates of his marvelous restoring grace, no matter how bad we've been. We like to be told that we, by some unbelievable miracle, are considered worthy to be servants of the Lord. But we don't like being told that our enemy has a wonderful capacity for God's marvelous restoring grace, or that he has incredible potential, or that the one against whom I speak is accountable to God and not to me at all. Remember, says Paul, that brother, the one you speak against, is God's servant. We like to think of our enemies as our enemies, like we own them. God says you can't have enemies. Your enemies aren't yours. They're mine. They don't report to you, Don. They report to God and are accountable to him as judge. One more thing. Because of the worship of tolerance in our society, and because of the way this has blindly kind of seeped into the value system of the contemporary church, we need to emphasize a necessary distinction at this point. When James says, verse 12, when James says, who are you to judge your neighbor? We know what he does mean and what he doesn't mean. James is not saying we're to be careless or undiscerning about either absolute biblical truth or careless about divine morality. We know this because Jesus himself said we were to make sound judgment in the keeping of our souls. This is Jesus. Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment. Most people don't know. They know Jesus said don't judge. They don't know this one. There are all sorts of people who make their value assessments in life based on outward show that some people can put on. But there are much bigger issues, and we should know them. We should know we are to be very careful and discerning when it comes to the kind of teaching we allow to shape our minds. Jesus talked about it. Beware of false prophets. He means be thinking about this. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. You'll recognize them by their fruits. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? So we know Jesus doesn't mean just walk through life not thinking about anything. He's talking about, James is talking about in my personal relationships. I'm mad at you. Jesus is talking about in the body of Christ. Be careful of the kind of teaching. Don't just swallow anything that you hear. Be discerning. Judge it. You have to recognize there's those two things being talked about. We know there's a time of judgment in the church itself. Paul writes to the church at Corinth, it's actually reported that there is sexual immorality among you, and of a kind not even tolerated among pagans. A man has his father's wife. Can you believe that? Now watch. And you are arrogant. Why doesn't he say you're immoral? You're unholy. You're carnal. Why arrogant? Ought you not rather to mourn? Let him who has done this be removed from among you. For though absent in body, I'm present in spirit, and as if present, I've already pronounced judgment on the one who did such a thing. Arrogant. Why does he use that word? And I'll tell you why he does it. They're not doing this. They aren't mourning. They're arrogant because probably they're saying, you know what? Who are we to judge? Sure, there's incest and there's a few things going on, and this is getting rampant, this attitude in the church. We embrace everybody. We embrace everybody. We love everybody. Jesus accepts everybody. We accept everybody. That's why Paul, when he looks at the church, he says, you guys are just arrogant. Who do you think you are allowing this? Why aren't you mourning? That's the word he uses. So here's a situation where a church says, oh, no, we don't judge. Paul says, well, you ought to. So we know from the New Testament there are all sorts of times when judgment is not only right, but it's required. So what can James mean in verse 12 when he says there's only one lawgiver and judge? He's able to save and to destroy. But who are you to judge your neighbor? And you remember the context. James condemns these people for speaking evil against their brothers and sisters. It's a cloaked revenge. It's private, behind the scenes. It's a vendetta, tearing my enemy down. So the sin here is personal. These are words against a brother, not against an issue. This kind of bitterness and anger, it comes about when I've been mistreated personally. My feelings, my rights, and I want to get even. I want to get even. I said at the beginning of this teaching that we're studying humility's opposites, two forms of arrogance that James warns against. The sin of speaking evil against a brother or sister. That's first. Now he moves on to the second. Point number 3. The sin of not planning God into the details of our lives. It's in 13 to 16. Come now, you who say today or tomorrow we'll go into such and such a town, spend a year there. Quite a while. And trade, and we're going to make money. Yet, you don't know what tomorrow will bring. Dawn, everyone in this room ought to ask this question to yourself right now. What is your life? Well, I'm a father, I'm a grandparent, my husband, a pastor. I'm a golfer. People would debate that. And it's not that those answers are wrong, but they're all on one side of the ledger. What else is true about me? I'm a mist by the road. You see it in the morning when it's cool. You come back at noon and it's gone. There, Dawn, that's you. That's you. You're a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, your boast in your, there's that word again, arrogance. I didn't mean it to be arrogant. I don't even think about it. Arrogance. All such Boasting. There it is again. It's evil. I think it's important to understand what the real sin is in these words. So James pictures a typical group of Christian people making typical business plans. In those days, extensive travel, especially by ship, would be long, slow, easily taking a year on many occasions. And so not surprisingly, with that kind of trip, there's great care. Planning is needed to maximize time, to make profit. And James isn't saying there's anything wrong with that. The sin James describes isn't traveling, it isn't planning, it isn't doing business, and it isn't making money. Lots of money. I had a guy in this church say, would you have a problem if I had a $100,000 automobile? And I said, not if you had $100,000 for missions. The sin James described isn't traveling, it isn't planning, it's not doing business, it's not making money. That's not it. Okay, what's the sin? What is the sin James feels is so deadly? Evil speaking, presumption. They're sins of pride. They smother humility, and God can't exalt your life. These sins keep God from exalting your life. That's what he's saying. It's not the brilliance in business that James is addressing. It's not the carefulness in planning. It's the blindness. It's the blindness of their own lives that's the problem. They know how to do business. What they don't know is how to think about life. And here's the life lesson to take home from church. The most dangerous thing about the ordinary routines of your life is the way routines make us forget about God. The most dangerous thing about the routines of your life is the way routines make us forget about God. I don't mean deny his existence. I don't mean we don't come to church and worship, raise our hands, close our eyes, we do that, but that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about the routines of my life, the rest of my life. Look at the way these people make their plans. Today or tomorrow, we're going to go to such and such a town. We're going to spend a year. We're going to trade. We're going to make profit. And the problem is everything is framed as an absolute certainty. That's the problem. These verses aren't just here to teach Christians to recite Lord willing. That's not, so I'm going to my Christian Ed class, Lord willing. I'm going to go home for lunch, Lord willing. That's not, it's not treating the text like a lucky rabbit's foot. It's not just saying the words. These business people have probably been Christians for a while now. In this text, they're very busy. And as James watches them, Pastor James watches them make their plans, he notices there's something wrong. They're planning everything as though it was all secured. They don't think of all their plans and all their efforts as in any way contingent. Oh, they know they are. They're not stupid, but they're not thinking enough about that. Their future doesn't seem to depend on anyone but them. Of course, deep in their hearts, deep in all of our hearts, we know it does. If you ask them about life, they would say, well, it's all in the Lord's hands. I'm just here as his servants. They knew all of that, but they didn't think about that. And they didn't think about it because everything was going pretty fine. Everything was working. And they forgot the only reason it was all working was the grace and goodness of the Lord. It's very easy to do, isn't it, church? It's very easy to do. 15 years, I'll have my house paid for. 20 payments, the car is mine. If I can get these 2 projects off the ground, I'll be in a position to retire with money in the bank. And James isn't saying there's anything wrong with any of those ideas, except you can begin to kid yourself into thinking, that's how life works. And it isn't. Or you just project yourself into the future as though it was already good and accomplished. And the net effect of that kind of presumption, arrogance, James calls it. Here's the problem. It takes eternity out of my reckoning. That's terrible. That's terrible. I'm going to do this, then I'm going to do that. November, I'm going to do this. We'll have World Impact on the 16th. I think Tom's got a Christmas thing lined up. That's going to be great. Love Christmas. Then it's New Year's. New Year's is a great time. I think I might have a cruise in January. I got my whole life there. Blah, 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 blah. What makes you think you're going to get there? Do you see the issue? Jesus talked about a farmer. Do you remember? And God had blessed this farmer with great crops year after year after year, and he harvests. He can't even sell it all. What do? Well, you build bigger barns. Never entered his head. God says, you're checking out tonight. Tonight. No, it's not a sin to expand your farm. No, it's not a sin to build a bigger barn. No, it's not a sin to plan work trips and work hard at your business. But it is wrong not to reckon the shortness of life and the reality of eternity and judgment into your daily plans. That's what James is saying in verse 14. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. Talk to Jeff Tomlinson. You don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. And none of you do. We all tend to ignore God most in the areas of life where we excel with our own skills and abilities. Church, consciously bring God into all of life every day, especially the areas where you can do a pretty good job yourself. Simple, practical way to do it is simply to pause long enough to ask the right questions. Is it automatically God's will for me to grab every chance for advancement in this world system? Automatic? Might he want me to take a cut in pay or a demotion so I can spend more time with my spouse? What am I doing with the prosperity he's sending my way? Bigger barns? More vehicles? What am I doing? How do I assess and fulfill my divine calling from God in this world? If I make a lot of money, I must fight the natural inclination that God gave me that just to spend it on my own security and comfort. Do you ever notice how if someone told me 20 years ago, okay, I've been here 43 years. If someone had told me 30 years ago exactly what my salary would be today, and they told me that 30 years ago, I would have thought, what am I going to do with all that extra money? And now all of a sudden, everything with my current income, everything's become a necessity. Have you noticed that? It really doesn't matter how much you make. It's a necessity. Or does God want me to establish a level of living and everything that comes in over that is for his kingdom? You know, just questions to ask. 4. Almost done. Just a few minutes. How to meekly receive the implanted word on this important subject. Remember, we're talking about being humble with the words we speak against people, with the way we bring God into the routines of daily life. So we'll be humble. Why do we want to be humble? So God can exalt us. That's what we're talking about here. Do you want God to exalt your life? These humility killers you've got to deal with. 4, how to meekly receive the implanted word on this important subject. Verse 17. You do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? You're a mist that appears for a little while and vanishes. So whoever knows, now you know. You know. Whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him, it's a sin. Why does he say for him it's a sin? Well, because James knows my tendency to measure my spiritual depth by people around me. I don't know of very many people who start each day reminding themselves that their life is just a mist. And there's no security or certainty in the things of this world. Most of us live for all the world like everything hinges on our doing and our getting. James knows that. I'm surrounded by people like that. So are you. James knows I use this argument to prove my life isn't wicked. I'm average. I'm typical. I take great comfort in this. I really do. When God speaks to me and I can show him your lives, I feel great. That's why I need to hear James say, Don, I'm not calling your life to be average. If you know what's right and you don't do it, even if nobody else does it, for you, it's sinful. For you, if you know the truth, forget about anybody else. For you, you need to respond. You need to respond. If you know you should view your life as short and fragile and ultimately only safe when it's radically dedicated to God's kingdom, and you don't do anything about that, for you, that's a sin. So, teach us to number our days. Teach us, Lord, to do this every day. Not to be gloomy, not to be morbid, but so that you can exalt us. Don't you want that? So he can exalt you. You kind of have to get out of the way first, though.